Let's return, though, to that speech from the Chinese ambassador here in Canberra yesterday. It was one that for many people was quite provocative. He made it clear that, for example, force is an option in unifying, as China says it, Taiwan, or taking Taiwan, taking control of Taiwan. Since then, and since the speech, we have had Beijing say that the military exercises around Taiwan have ceased, but they could start up in the near future. Joining me now is Emeritus Professor Thayer from UNSW here in Canberra. Thank you very much for your time. A very interesting speech from the ambassador. What did you take out of it?
Well, when I watched it, I saw a silver-tongued diplomat extending an iron fist covered with a glove. And by that I mean China has three warfares. The last ambassador was the wolf warrior. This one is here to promote the use of public information, media warfare, psychological warfare, and legal warfare to convince Australia it's now time for a reset and to encourage those elements inside Australia that benefit from this relationship, and we do have in trade, tourism, and educational industries, those groups, to put pressure on the government to get on with resetting relations with China.
And obviously all the economic benefits that would come with it. So you think the ambassador is essentially trying to say to those groups, here's your window, it won't be there forever. Let's have a rapprochement, but on China's terms.
Right, mutual respect, but we heard no concessions.
Even on Australians detained in China,
yeah.
The farcical element of human rights and so on.
And this the current government, when it came to office, offered that reset in the sense of, not upping the rhetoric, just playing a straight bat, if I could put it that way, and then the mainland China getting very upset anytime criticism was drawn. So the fundamentals are still there. China's growing, it's going to be big, it's going to be dominating. It wants to recover Taiwan. But how do you show other countries in the region that they should follow a certain path of obedience towards China? And that's, as we know, that Australia has been made an example. That I think was a concern.
And is that the inherent issue with Australia, even if it wanted to go down this path of, let's have a rapprochement? What can we actually offer an olive branch on that would be anything other than ceding important sovereign points and points of principle in international law that we feel are inviolable?
Well, China's trying to unhinge Australia from the AUKUS and from ANZUS. That's showing an independent line, which they keep saying to us. My retort is Australians can think. They're kind of saying, no, you're only mouthing American words. So if you stop mouthing American words and begin to distance yourself, that's what China would find acceptable.
Trying to, I suppose, try to understand President Xi, clearly he wants control of Taiwan again, and this is a really important thing in his mind and the Chinese Communist Party. Is that where territorial ambitions end, do you think, when we're thinking more about the region and how China wants to shape the region?
Well, China is quite clear under Xi Jinping. They want the second largest economy. They see themselves at some point becoming the greatest economy. They want to be number one and be treated that way within the region. That first island chain, of which Taiwan forms a vital part, is constraining Chinese military power. They want to acquire it. Already they have reached a quantitative advantage over the US, closing the qualitative gap in military terms. They feel time's on their side, and the example of Ukraine frightens them. A unified West, now working with allies in the East, can block that. And China can't show weakness because they're seeing those pressures applied on Russia. They don't want them to apply on China. And so they're pushing strong now to get us to really to back off.
And you say they feel time is on their side, but this is the interesting point or debate. Is it on their side? It seems as though with every day that passes, resolve around Taiwan increases, both the country itself and countries, Western countries such as the US and Australia, and also the well-spoken of demographic and economic issues in China. It's on the rise now, but it might not be in 10 years. So this might actually expedite this whole sort of crisis.
Right. Well, my previous answer, I conflated the long-term trends, which I basically emphasize, and the short-term trends, caused by the war in Ukraine, caused by the COVID outbreak in China and their lockdown. Their economy's slowing. They're reaching a gray-haired population where people like me are going to be really have to be taken care of. I'm in my 70s. That's going to be an added expense to them. And also that China's hope to have that military advantage is going to be really stymied by what AUKUS offers. It's not all about putting nuclear submarines. It's all the artificial intelligence, quantum computing, etc. So that's there. But the time factor is Xi Jinping will get his 5 years. It's
in November, another 5 years. So.
But it's hard to look into the future, but it's unlikely to see it another 5, and it's unlikely to see Taiwan's unification. And the simple fact is, I studied there for 2 years in the 50s, but back repeatedly, particularly since the South China Sea came on the boil, the Taiwanese are independent in their minds. They're absolutely, they can go anywhere on their passports in the world that's friendly, and that can't be changed. And also, like they're the top semiconductor exporter, so they have a heft in the world well beyond the island.
Yeah, it's been unified for only a period of 4 years and never under the Chinese Communist Party. It was 1945 to 1949 from memory. Just finally, a theoretical point of view. Okay, so if the US, Australia, they just decide, do you know what, it's not worth getting involved in Taiwan. Is there any prospect that at that stage President Xi says, well, great, we got our way, I can claim this as a victory and try a rapprochement and have more cooperation with the rest of the world? Or would that just be seen as a sign of weakness?
Well, China just released a white paper on the unification, and they offer 2 possible approaches. And one is the soft approach. In other words, Taiwan, there's no, that support for your own self-defense is no longer there, so reunify. And the other they call the Peking model, where in the final stages of the Civil War that you mentioned, they surrounded the Kuomintang nationalist forces in Peking, as it was called, and offered them a surrender, and they did. And that served as a model for other cities. And then the nationalists fled to Taiwan. So having overwhelming force, but to offer the hand of surrender was their approach. So the 2, open diplomacy with Taiwan and try to encourage them. The other hand, have overwhelming force. There's no other choice.
Does seem ominous when you paint it like that, but as you mentioned, the independence of the Taiwanese and the fierceness of that has only grown over the years. Professor, we've got to leave it there. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Tom.